Hello everyone, and thank you so much for joining us here today for this live Seatrade Cruise Talks webinar sponsored by Inmarsat, caring for crew mental health on land and at sea. This is a live webinar, so if you have any questions, please jot these down in the box just to the right of your screen, and we will address those later in the discussion. In 24 hours, a recording of this session will also be available to you. If you do have any technical difficulties, please just send us a message in the chat box and we'll do our best to help you out. So our panelists today, who I am delighted to present to you, are clinical psychologist and psychotherapist Charles Watkins, alongside Michael Lopez, Vice President of Human Resources at Royal Caribbean Group. We also have Peter Broadhurst, Senior Vice President for Inmarsat, and Pam Kern, a mental health professional, former seafarer and founder of Happiness at Sea. So if you wouldn't mind, can I just ask for a moment, each of you, just to tell us a little bit about yourselves and why you felt you'd like to participate in this panel discussion today. So let's start with Michael, if you wouldn't mind.
Good morning, everyone. So as Holly mentioned, I have the honor of leading human resources for Royal Caribbean International. We have 60,000 crew across 26 ships, 2 private destinations, and a handful of offices around the world. I'm based in Miami, sunny Miami, and I've been with the brand for 2 years now. And in those 2 years, I've had 2 different jobs. The first was unparalleled growth, peak of hiring 10,000 people and promoting 10,000 people a year. And then the last year has been, an incredible set of challenges regarding winding down, repatriation, and now preparing to return again. So COVID clearly has brought some significant challenges, but there's actually been tremendous opportunity to advance conversations such as this one, but more than just talk about it, really use the service suspension to put in place some of the things and really advance the topic of crew mental health and wellness, which I'm very passionate about. And I'm thrilled to collaborate with this group of amazing panelists. So thanks for having me.
Thank you so much, Michael, coming to us from the cruise capital of the world. Wonderful. And over to Pam, please, in Maine, I believe.
That's right. I'm in very cold Maine, where it is 15 Fahrenheit or -9 Celsius. We just had 2 feet of snow, a little over half a meter. So it's a little cold here, but I'm grateful to be here. I am a former seafarer. I worked on ships for 18 years in the cruise sector as a guest relations manager. So there's pretty much nothing that I haven't seen or experienced. I am also a mental health counselor, and I had worked in an employee assistance program in EAP and land in New York City. And I'm also in the family of a seafarer. My husband is a seafarer. So I kind of use that synergy of the 360 approach to help crew with mental health, as well as mitigate risk, not only for them, but also for the industry. So I founded Happiness at Sea, and we'll dive more into it a little bit later, but crew is my passion, mental health, because I've been there and done that. I'm an expert in the field of not only mental health, but the maritime industry. So I look forward to collaborating with everyone as a joint venture. Thanks.
Thank you very much. And over to you, Peter, please, if you wouldn't mind telling us a little bit about yourself and why you'd like to participate in this panel today.
Okay, so thank you very much. Obviously, thank you to Seatrade for organising this event. I'm sure it will be an interesting panel session, as I'm joined by some esteemed speakers. I should obviously thank the sponsor, as they also pay me and employ me. So it's great to be here. My name is Peter Broadhurst. I'm the Senior Vice President for Safety and Security, and I also look after yachting and passenger at Inmarsat Maritime. I've been with Inmarsat for almost 7 years, and I started my maritime career with Cunard as a radio officer. I used to tap a Morse key in those days. I've been in maritime communications for the majority of my career, and I'm on the board of the World Maritime University, and also on the board of CIRM, who looks after the manufacturers of equipment and the service providers in that industry. I'm an ambassador for the Sailor Society, and I support the International Maritime Rescue Federation. So whilst I work for a technology company, and there's nothing more exciting or cutting edge than satellites, I have a large empathy for the 1.6 million seafarers who make up our amazing and rich industry, and champion their support wherever I possibly can. So I'm very happy to be here today, as this is, I would think, a very important topic that we're covering.
Thank you very much, Peter. And last but certainly not least, Charles, over to you, please.
Hi, everyone. Yes, I'm Charles Watkins. I feel very honored to be part of this group of extraordinary people with so much expertise in the area. Mental health has always been my passion, and I am a clinical psychologist and psychotherapist, but also managing director of mental health support solutions. We offer psychological support and emotional support for seafarers around the world. We offer crisis intervention and crisis management in situations where things get really bad, for example. But we also offer normal support for people that can call us with any types of issues like anxiety and depression or conflict on board. We also do trainings for seafarers, and we psychoeducate about the importance of resilience, anxiety, culture, and certainly the problems that the pandemic popped up with during the course of this time. We have a holistic approach, so we try to support everyone in terms of healthy diet and healthy fitness routine. We look at specifically foods that decrease depression and anxiety. And we also do onboard service. So if there's a true crisis, something happened, and we go on board, offer psychological first aid and stabilize the crew, and offer psych education and do follow-ups to make sure they're okay. So I feel very passionate about this area, as you can imagine, and I just love to. I'm very happy to be part of this. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much. Now, actually, it couldn't be a more timely occasion in which to speak about this issue. Yesterday, the International Labour Organisation's Committee of Experts proclaimed that governments had failed in their duty of care for seafarers under the international law, the laws that we have during the COVID-19 pandemic. And as we know, just 46 states classify seafarers as key workers. So one of the points that came out yesterday was in reference to the crew change crisis. And so I would like, first of all, let's come to you, Charles, because what issues are you encountering at Mental Health Support Solutions at the moment? How are you supporting crew on land and at sea during these unprecedented times?
Mm-hmm. We've seen a lot of things pop up lately, especially anxiety, worrying, catastrophizing, obviously, especially during the first wave, because there was a lot of uncertainty. So we had a lot of cases which called us about support, emotional support in these hard times, not knowing when they'll be able to see their family again, really not knowing about the virus at all, or what's going to happen to them. And we certainly experienced, I wouldn't say an increase, but it surfaced the fact that there's still bullying and harassment on board. So they might have been able to take that pressure in before, but the added stressors just surfaced their ability to cope with it. So we saw a lot of that pop up, which we thought was not as prevalent, but unfortunately it still is. And we're working on that to really psychoeducate about the problems and the very, very real threat it is when it comes to mental health on board. Yeah.
Thank you. And you're calling for a new protocol, is that right?
Yes, we are. So during the pandemic, we had experience with training a lot of crew, but also onshore staff when it comes to resilience, crisis communication, and the importance of empathetic communication, understanding. So yeah, what we're trying to do is we're trying to implement psychological first aid as a standard for the industry. So we would like to educate at least one person on board, like there is someone in terms of a medical first aid. We would like to train someone in psychological first aid, because it's extremely important to act quickly and to stabilize quickly. And that really, like in medicine, the quicker you treat, the better the prognosis, and the better they can recuperate from stress and from events that are traumatic or tragic in nature.
Right, I see. And I think that culture to a large part can kind of play into this, that we need some greater understanding of the different needs of cultures and how they express feelings. So would you be able to provide us with some background on the challenges that can arise and what cruise lines really need to do to make sure that seafarers are feeling understood?
I love that topic because it just shows how important it is to understand not just culture, but individuals. So culture plays a vital role in the way they communicate, the way they deal with anger, the way they deal with depression, the way they deal with negative feedback or conflict. So some cultures are more prone to express their anger vividly. Other cultures find it more important to maybe hide anger or seek for harmony. So there's very different coping strategies. But again, when we're talking about culture, it's still important to understand the person that you are talking to. So there are individual differences. Certainly, culture is a big issue. We educate about culture, the differences in cultures, the rich differences, and the importance to really understand where that person's coming from, how he or she is dealing with these emotions, so you can better address them and help them find their own personal coping strategies. Yeah, and again, remember, it's always important to, even if you talk about culture, it's important to talk about individual differences. So who exactly is it you're talking to? How is that person specifically dealing with these things? Because again, I'm from Hamburg, and even the person that grew up next to me and is my neighbor could be very different than how I deal with emotions. So that also should be highlighted. Thank you.
Certainly, thank you very much. And Pam, I believe that when it comes to this side of things, you know, really, you know, in your experience as a seafarer and with your work, you know, do you feel that it's a taboo area? How open is the climate on board cruise ships and amongst cruise lines to be able to talk about this important issue?
Exactly. The words mental health still carries stigma, especially with the countries where seafarers come from, predominantly the Philippines and India. What I have found successful in my work is the science of drivers of happiness when it comes to crew mental health without actually using the words mental health. It's because the word happiness is more universal. It's accepted across all cultures and various belief systems. So happiness puts us more in the same boat, if you will, when it comes to stigmas and beliefs. So happiness at Sea looks at the misconceptions of happiness, why we get it wrong, and what the research shows. But it also includes addressing the threats to happiness and mental health that seafarers experience, the isolation, the depression, anxiety. In this way, we're complementing culture and beliefs, but we're still addressing the mental health issues that affect seafarers through the lens of mental health and, of course, the company and their bottom line. So happiness at sea is two parts. It's prevention and intervention. The prevention part is building resilience through strategies to inoculate crew members against these threats of mental health and unhappiness that comes their way when working on board a ship, because as we all know, where you live is where you work and there's no boundaries. But we create kind of an influence model to complement that. So what we do is behavior kind of shifts in small deliberate tasks of strategies or nudges, given intentional repetitions to practice, feedback. So it's small actions with big impact. We also include crew families, which I feel is an untapped resource. So whatever strategies we give crew members, we also give their families for that 360 holistic approach. And we also employ co-counseling model. So they have a go-to person while on board. If they don't feel comfortable with somebody on board, then they've got somebody at home. The goal is to break the cycle of depression and anxiety, especially thoughts of suicide. And Happiness at Sea also looks at giving days off. We were able to do this successfully as a pilot program with one cruise line, both big and small departments. What we did was we streamlined and reshifted, pardon me, the workload, and we were able to reduce exhaustion and cynicism between 25 and 35%. And all of the qualitative and quantitative data has showed that crew became more happier and more productive. And we had a positive correlation too with guest satisfaction surveys. So when the cruise lines resume again, and if crew can't go ashore due to COVID, I suggest looking at a viable solution of giving crew members days off, and yes, paid days off. It creates a buffer in a contained environment where there's no boundaries, that crew can actually have some downtime to rest. Qualitatively and quantitatively, crew had said it actually helped them gain control in an environment where they have very little control. They can't control what they eat, you know. Of course, they can't buy their own food. They can't drive to the own place that they want to. So it really helps with the uncertainty. And the ITF Yale report did show that lack of control is a huge negative factor for crew members and their mental health. So it's really something to look at in terms of prevention and intervention. That land-based EAP models, their return on investment is about $1 for every $1 invested, your return is about every $3 to $10, which is a huge amount. So imagine the return on investment possibilities for not only happiness, or what I call ROH, return on happiness, not only for the seafarer, but for the company. So I would encourage to look at your own influence models, looking at the science of happiness, especially because it looks more at the threats to happiness and mental health without using mental health. When it comes to stigma and multiple belief systems.
Michael, hearing what Pam's just said there, what's your take on that, and how realistic is it that we can really focus on happiness within the cruise industry and get the change that seafarers so desperately need?
I was hoping you were going to come to me, otherwise I was going to interrupt, because
you interrupted, more than welcome.
We haven't collaborated. We actually embraced the approach of happiness drivers. So we conducted the largest cruise study ever for our organization. We received over 50,000 responses. And at this moment, we were getting responses from crew at home because we weren't in business as usual. So there was much to really be learned about control and what people are feeling while they're at home. What are the main drivers for their return? Like, what are they most looking forward to? And then balancing that with some of the basic human needs that they're not able to provide for their families right now. And what is that mental kind of framework that they have that really kind of results in this high anticipation that is just like pent up demand for crew to return. We have been returning crew. We have ships in minimum manning. We've got to really think through. We had to think through this because we have folks in quarantine. So I'll give an example. In the study, we found there were 8 happiness drivers for our crew and 10 stressors having to do with COVID, travel. Travel used to not be a stressor. Now it is. So this study really enabled us to pause and take a look. And so for all of our crew that are just doing the rotations right now for minimum manning, there's a required quarantine. That's a 2-week isolation event that we've never had to deal with before. So to Pam's point, we studied the happiness drivers. We then partnered with mental health professionals to basically go through what is life like in a 14-day quarantine while you're in a stateroom. What are the things that we need to really amp up? And we have a day-by-day playbook that incorporates mindset that we expect the crew member to be in, the sentiment, and then specific tactics for our shipboard teams to action on, including frequent surveys and sentiment, so that we can really address folks who are having a tough time in isolation. That will then be applied across all aspects of crew experience. We're calling it the crew journey. And it aligns very well with what Pam is speaking about.
Oh, that's really excellent to hear. Now, Peter, this is really interesting. I'm very much looking forward to hearing what you have to say on this, because technology, that's something that you feel can solve some of these issues. But is technology a solution to the problem or an enabler of mental, social and physical stress?
It's great to hear the passion from the other speakers, in all fairness, around this, because I feel that, yeah, with the IMO and the International Labour Conventions and all this stuff, it's crew welfare is very high on the agenda. It's talked about a lot, but putting it into practice is the hard thing, and recognizing there's a problem is the first part of it, and that's why we kind of commissioned this report that, you know, we have. It's on our website. You can download it. We call it Welfare 2.0, just to collect the data and find out what is going on, because technology can help you just in the simplest ways of understanding problems and moving forward in terms of with the position of welfare with crewing, because it's poorly reported and it's poorly truly understood. So we are moving forward, we are getting a lot better, but there's more that can be done for sure. And in the report, it said 28% of seafarers screened in the study showed signs of depression, anxiety, or both. And a quarter of them showed signs of moderate to severe depression. And I'm not going to talk about the actual symptoms. There's the specialists on the panel that can cover that. But you know, if this is left unchecked, poor mental health in seafarers is just as much a safety problem as it is a welfare problem. And we identify that, you know, connectivity has transformed seafarers. They spend their downtime on board basically trying to, you know, talk to their family back home and have that social connection with their loved ones and what have you. And it's really important. It's something that we take for granted in our day-to-day lives ourselves. But for a seafarer, that isolation can be really, really difficult. So I think that, you know, technology is not a silver bullet. It's not going to solve the problems, but it can help, and it can help really just by very simple things that we can put in place. You know, widespread adoption of tools that can help individuals, seafarers, and fleet managers to take steps and understand. You heard about what Michael said about doing their research and things like that, getting that data and putting it in the right place to begin with, and then building on that. Can really build simple plans and simple programs that will push us in the right direction. And as this grows and gains momentum, I think that's where technology, you know, monitoring cardiovascular and all those kind of issues, and controlling the food they eat, as we say, you know, it's not their choice a lot of the times. Making sure they're healthy, making sure they're in a happy environment is really important. And yeah, from our point of view, technology can most definitely play a strong part in that.
Well, Peter, I mean, you know, off the, you know, the top of my head, I'm thinking of examples such as those with contemporary payment solutions, which are actually massively helping, the technology helping seafarers, where now they can transfer with many of these providers money to their families anywhere in the world when they're in a situation, as we have seen with COVID. That's maybe one less stress factor, and also you know, that, you know, people can connect. We've got technology, we've got the internet, and we're all very much connected, and people can find help, hopefully in places that even in there, as going back to Charles' point with bullying, hopefully they can reach out, they can connect with other people, and also technology in terms of education. I know that in view of COVID, that now we're looking at ways that seafarers can at home, do training courses, and again, that may be a big help going forward. But Peter, let me just say, before I open up some questions to the other panelists too, is technology, in your view, the only option for welfare improvement?
Oh no, for sure. As I said, it's not a silver bullet. It's I think it's a vital role in it needs to be played in terms of embedding policies and practices to enhance safety and well-being on board. Data-based tool sets can work for the human element and track changes over time and those kind of things. These are all there in place. So if we're going to start eliminate these issues, though, that we currently face for crew wellbeing, technology will help, but it's imperative that the stakeholders come together, I think, to create and work on common platforms and collect data, anonymize it, share it, and use it to identify wider welfare trends and all those kind of things. From our report, there's $3.8 billion of ship software management out there. I mean, it's crazy the amount of money that is actually spent in the software industry around applications for vessels and things like that. But a very, very small percentage is actually done on welfare, to be quite honest. And with all the new startups that are coming in, since 2010, one of the figures we had was $280 million in venture funding in them, but only a small amount of that, about 2 million, is actually in where you're looking at actual well-being and welfare and safety orientated stuff. It's mainly around engine monitoring and performance monitoring and all those kind of things around the return on investment for the ship itself. So we still have a long way to go, but there are a lot of good startups out there, and there's a lot of good initiatives that had a lot of value in my opinion, at a very small cost, in all fairness. And if we can gather that data and build on it and really show the bigger picture, I think that this will gather more momentum and will make seafarers a more safer place for them to be, and a happier place, most definitely, in the future.
Excellent. I couldn't agree more. Now I'm going to open this up to any one of you. You could all talk, whoever wants to. But I'd like to ask, how do you take care of crew when they are on land, particularly in the extended period of no operations due to COVID-19?
I'm an ambassador for the Sailor Society, and I work with the UK charities, and I can say, that the shoreside component of the support that was necessary was really high during COVID. It's just as essential for those people. For every person that was trying to get off a ship, there was also someone trying to get back on a ship. And if you can't work and you don't know when you're going to work, and coming from those countries that were recognized, the Philippines and India, it's very difficult. And so yeah, the shoreside element, and it's just as important to me in terms of a seafarer. That's his profession, but he doesn't do anything else. When he goes home, he's still thinking about his job. He's still trained in his job, and he's part of the job. So they need support both shoreside and on board the vessel, and the tools and the training we can give and the insights and all those sort of things will help them and help their families and the generations below them. And we talked about culture, and shipping is a global organization, and it can break down a lot of culture barriers in terms of the mixing of people, vessels, cruise ships going around the world, etc. We want a more diverse and a less racist world, and we want all this to come together, and we can play a part in that, to be quite honest. So You know, it's yeah, we've got as I said, 1.6 million seafarers from all over the world mixing, and we have a part to play in the future of this planet's makeup and overall globalization culture. So yeah, it's a challenge, but I think it's a good challenge.
Thank you. Yes.
If I can add, again, my philosophy about COVID is the opportunity that it has provided. So when you're business as usual, you're moving, you know, thousands of crew in and out across the globe. The communications with our crew were primarily about operational things like travel and your next assignment, and it didn't present the need that it did today. And we started learning very early on through repatriation. We needed to start communicating and continuing the sense of community with crew. The moment repatriation was no easy feat. And then once you were home, now what? And some examples were we started amping up just our crew newsletter that was really for crew on board. We completely had to retool it now to keep people connected, sharing memories, you know, because we didn't know when we were coming back. We received 700 outreach from crew every other week, sharing what's going on in their family. Like, there is a real need for connection. And then number two is financial stresses in this service suspension. So not only is craving a routine, wanting to get back and be in service, providing for a family is something that is a huge stressor, and it's deeply concerning for us. So we had to retool our portals that were really for operational communication to now deliver like mental health, financial assistance, hardship support in digitally, because it forced us to now have to keep in touch with folks at home in a way. But I will tell you, we won't walk back from that. The work now has been done, and I think the crew have shared with us that connection is essential to an overall kind of health and wellness, and accessibility to EAP for family. No one used it before. Today, it's like night and day, and by making it accessible to family, that was a really big deal for us, and it wasn't part of the model initially because it wasn't needed. So just two examples that I thought I would share.
Thank you so much, Michael. You know, that's so insightful, and actually to hear you speak as well about the real fears that these crew members have. It's so important to really, you know, have an understanding of that. Taking on that point, how do you mentally prepare crew for debarking the vessel to return home, particularly with inspiring confidence in safety procedures as well?
My suggestion would be communication. Communicate with them what to expect. Let's say, for the first example, is when they go back on board, what will it look like? What would be the worst case scenario if you can't have shore leave, if you can't communicate with your family? And maybe suggestions that they can have for their families, having communication plans. That, okay, if you cannot communicate with me, don't assume the worst, but have a plan for that, as well as a financial plan. If the industry resumes and then stops again, what will that look like? So the more you plan, the more you keep that locus of control from, you know, a psychological concept. So have plans in place and communicate with crew what that will look like, I think is vital. The biggest concern that I have is the uncertainty with crew members. Even my husband is a seafarer, and every day when an email comes in from the head office, it's okay, there's another round of people being let go. Is that going to be me? Is that not going to be me? So I'd love to see even too, maybe focus groups online in small groups where, you know, crew can speak to each other. I know, especially in the Philippines, they already have that close-knit group. I've seen a lot of private WhatsApp groups and Facebook groups, but we're built to be social beings. So to connect in that way, I think is super important. But to prepare them then to go back, if they're going back home, what would that look like for family members? I have heard some stories where a small village in the Philippines, where Krumbert came from, didn't want him to come back because they were afraid he would be spreading COVID, and was unwelcome by his family and his friends. He had to live in another village for months until he was expected, or culturally let back in. So what would that look like, and to prepare them for that? But I think the key is really communication, both, from ship to shore, shore to ship, as well as with the families.
Certainly, Pam, thank you. I mean, even thinking of how difficult it must be, we've had instances already, as we've seen on board cruise vessels, where there have been false alarms, where crew members have tested positive for coronavirus, and actually it turns out that they didn't have it. But you can imagine the worry and the concern amongst people on board, knowing that, have I been exposed to it? Has my colleague and my friend been exposed to it? It's a very uncertain time. So thank you very much. And finally, before I go to our questions, because we've got many excellent questions that have come.
I'd love to add to that, if I may.
Yes, that's what I was going to come to you, Charles. Exactly. So thank you, please.
Thank you. I think, yes, communication is key. That being said, I think we have that's why I like seafarers a lot. They're astoundingly resilient creatures. They have a lot of resources at their disposal, but they sometimes they sometimes in stress situations forget about it. And the opportunities of a crisis are fantastic. So it's networking, building new networks that haven't been there before, and communicating more. So we are social creatures. There are a lot of processes that happen in our body which strengthen resilience by connecting to people, by being in a group, and by openly communicating about the issues. The crisis is there, uncertainty is there, and there's nothing we can do about that. But we can educate, we can connect. I had this interesting master who was, he didn't know when he was going to get back onto the ship, and he was worried, and he was actually, I love this story. He actually used his internal networks resources to reach out to friends, and he found a job, believe it or not, bringing groceries to older people and getting money and trying to get their family by like that. And then when he was on board, he communicated this actively, because people didn't know how it was on shore. They just wanted to get off the ship. And he said, listen, it's really hard on land. And suddenly the crew was enlightened by understanding how it is to be on shore. They understood the struggles, and then but they connected in a way that was greater than before. They built little networks among each other to help each other through these times. So I think really communicating, building new networks is a real important key when it comes to crisis situations. And we had clients start newsletters, parents' newsletters, and I want to use this time to just highlight how important even onshore staff is, and how much they struggle, and the amazing work they do. So they have suddenly they're at home. They can't go to the office. They have kids running in the background, but they still have to do suddenly 5-6 times the amount the work they used to. So they're caring for their kids. They're working at the same time, trying to get these crazy flights scheduled that switch every time, and then you have ports close at the next day, although they had everything lined up, and have to restart it. And having this parents newsletter expressing their struggles at home and connecting amongst each other was amazing to see. I thought that was just a beautiful way of creating new networks, creating new ways of supporting yourself, because everyone in their groups has different resources. And people may not realize this, but communicating, building new groups, talking to each other, and saying, oh, how do you cope with it? Oh, I do this. Oh, I can do this too. That's a great idea. It's just connecting to build resilience, to build more networks, to give more support in these times. I think so. It's right on my street. I'm totally. I think communication is key. That's the best way to do it. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. That's, a very good point, Charles. And I know that you've been looking into diets as well. You're looking at the whole picture, sleep patterns, different nutritions to bring out positive hormones and that sort of thing, aren't you? You're really coming at this from all angles.
That's true. Yeah. So it's also looking at what is available to them. That's why we cooperate with, for example, MCTC, which focus on diet. So what are the ingredients that help with stress? So why do omega-3 fatty acids help with certain types of depression? What does zinc and magnesium have to do with increasing levels of happiness? I like that word. We use well-being, but happiness is very important in the picture. I like that angle. So yeah, it's very much looking at holistically and making sure, even when they're stressed, because when you're stressed, when you feel depressed, you're less likely to eat healthy or to exercise. But if you continue what you're doing, and add, of course, positive affirmations, breathing techniques, meditation, prayer, whatever it is that person finds helpful, continue that process of mental hygiene, I think that's an important aspect as well. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Now I'm going to bring it to our questions now from our audience. So this is for anybody who wishes to take this question. What are the top 3 well-being concerns across the industry, and what are 3 effective preventative efforts that have been successful?
So from a well-being perspective, why don't we just use right now what the new norm will be like, right? So from a well-being, suicide prevention and addressing the stigma that either is what we discussed earlier today around the cultural dynamics, but the real, the dynamic on board, which is we're great at managing a crisis, right? And this is a prolonged crisis that we have not had to ever deal with before. So leadership and having a different mindset around crew mental health is an absolute priority. And some of the things that we are doing to address that is for our return to service is now every leader of others is going through mandatory what we're calling QPR, which is suicide prevention and awareness. The feedback that we're getting from our leaders who are 30-year veterans, and then you have our younger generation, is some aha moments about what our newer generation of crew need emotionally in order to be productive, and it's starting to challenge the traditional notion that, oh, if I'm not feeling good today, I'm worried that I might be sent home, right? And so we're really challenging that and partnering with our crew medical teams to take a very different approach to this, because the next generation of talent is coming with that expectation. If we're not meeting it, we are amping up the stressors for that group. Some of the other pieces about the life as a seafarer, we've also seen that within the first year, we have some of the most challenging situations with crew on board, where there's the stressors in adapting to life at sea. So we've put in some things to also remove the barriers to openly discuss if there's a financial concern that I'm having an adjustment problem with life at sea. We're removing some of the financial obstacles for them to be able to return home and then come back when they're ready. So it's really a multi-layered approach, but it starts with shifting the mindset. And if we don't do that, an EAP is not going to help anything. So really, I'm banking on leadership and shifting the culture on board. And we're using this restart as a way to kind of install a new set of behaviors and expectations on how to meet the emotional needs of our crew. the word empathy is not something you heard, well, a year ago. And now compassion and empathy are two leadership traits that we have to go back into service with.
Thank you, Michael. And I've got another question, and I'm really excited to hear what you all think about this. Do we believe that seafarers' stress levels have increased, for instance, when compared to 20 to 30 years ago? If so, why does the panel think that is? Obviously, excluding the current, pandemic. Outside of that, I think that's what this individual is talking about.
I can take that question. Indeed, as a former seafarer, I started in 1995. The service demands had increased year after year after year. When I started, the last guest walked off the ship at 10 a.m. The ship was empty until embarkation at 1 p.m. And then one cruise line changed that, where the last guest got off, the first guest got on, so you never had an empty ship. And so then all guests were brought to the Lido while we're cleaning the ship, behind the scenes. So the crew members, the cabin stewards, the housekeeping department can no longer go ashore during that empty time. So the service levels, the guest expectation, the guest demographic has all shifted to now where the demands are way, way more. And my 18 years at sea, I've seen crew members become way more and more tired. And this actually fascinated me, why they were becoming more tired and what interventions we can do on board to, prevent that. Unfortunately, with COVID, the cruise industry, there were 7 crew suicides. Of those 7, 5 were confirmed suicides. And to complement what Michael had said, that indeed empathy was a word never spoken of before, because on a ship as a seafarer, you always have to appear strong. Appearing weak is not something that's acceptable. So shifting the mindset to say, it's okay not to feel okay. Because let's be realistic, we work every day without a day off. 3 months, 6 months, 9 months. My research has showed that the fatigue starts to set in at 3.5 to 4 weeks. So that crew member now is less productive, less happy, and more of a risk, not only for themselves, but for the company. So really shifting the mindset to say it's okay not to feel okay, and to so that the younger generations can accept that going forward. But we have to start somewhere. Now is a perfect time. I just hope this attention of crew mental health continues when things go back to the new normal. I was in New York City for 9/11, and although that was a small event, which had a ripple effect around the world, when I was in New York City, it took 1 year and things went back to normal again, because it's customary for humans to kind of go, back to normal. But during that year, people were very kind to each other, and there was a lot of tolerance, and people opened doors for each other. And then after a year, it changed. It went back again. So I truly hope that all of the work we're doing, this awareness, continues on when the economy is good and COVID is gone finally. If we can keep this going, especially this awareness, then hopefully it will, continue on as a ripple effect for years to come.
Really insightful hearing you talk about that, and hearing about some of the accidents as well. I think 50% of accidents on board are due to human error caused by poor physical or mental health. So yes, now let me take it to our
but
next.
it doesn't necessarily get reported like that. It's always the individual that's at fault, but it's not the circumstances or the elements that cause that. That's where we need to really recognise that, and it is, that's the largest fatalities are through accidents in shipping. So there's a lot of work that goes on that, but you can't blame the people. Or not always, not all the time. Yeah, exactly.
They're a product of their environment.
Yeah, that's true.
They behave exactly, the environment. And I think if we can shift and take a look at how the environment affects behavior, and then with the mindset, that's a great formula, going forward to improve crew mental health at sea, and the awareness.
And there are some positives that's come out of COVID, and the support networks and the way people are communicating and stuff like that, which Michael touched on, and Charles. We should build on those, and I agree with Pam. Hopefully, it'll make the world a better place.
Excellent points, really excellent. I wonder about our next question. Michael or perhaps Peter would like to take this, but since crew are a valuable asset of a ship company, could we give more attention to preventative crew vaccination programs? Michael, Peter, Charles.
You take that, Michael.
Preventative crew vaccination. So, gosh, that's a that's an active topic of discussion. So health and safety of crew is a paramount concern that of the crew members coming back. Crew are also concerned about the health of the guests and what those protocols will be to ensure safety. The thing about vaccination is it's a supply chain concern right now on how we will secure and provide that, but we are discussing what are some of the safeguards that we're putting in place. And right now it's a Swiss cheese model, right, where you're putting in a lot of preventative barriers. We have a lot of testing steps and ongoing requirements that the CDC is required, right? The vaccination component already, from a flu perspective, we are making that part of. It's always been part of it. And so once we know we have availability of the the COVID vaccine, that is absolutely part of our healthy return to service plan, is to ensure the health and safety of customers and crew through looking at, when will that be available, how broadly will it be available, and can we secure, the supply to ensure that can be an offering to our crew.
Thank you very much. And I'm just going to speed things up again. I think we have time for one more question. When it comes to returning to service, it must be difficult to decide which crew are the first to return, which means that there will be some crew who will have to wait even longer to return to work. Have you got ideas of how to make this less stressful?
I would say communication. I can speak only from my own personal situation. So my husband is a sea captain and he's waiting to be called back. And he's been at sea 34 years. And it's the uncertainty is, okay, am I going back? When am I going back? Luckily, he's received great communication, which really helps with the uncertainty. That would be my best suggestion. Communicate with crew and as honest, as transparent as possible. Everybody wants to go back. Everybody wants to work. And, I think I maybe can only speak for myself, but we never thought we'd be in this situation where cruising would stop, like, almost the too big to fail model. But yeah, it's true. So the uncertainty really can take a huge toll on your mental health. And the best way is that the stakeholders communicate that, from our experience, of what is going on and what will happen, and give ample time that indeed, if you do, lose your job, that you're given ample time to do it. And also, communicate in a way where it's not 5 minutes before 5 on a Friday where you get an email, like really conscious, thought that do it early in the morning so you can receive questions. We wouldn't do this for guests and let them know at the last minute. So also treat crew the same way as we would treat our revenue guests.
One of the very important factors also when it comes to that is mental hygiene and psychoeducation. So what are the things I worry about? Look at those thoughts. When do I catastrophize? What can I do and what can't I do? So what are the thoughts? What are the worries that make sense, where I can act? What can I do about it? If there's nothing I can do about it, let's recognize these thoughts and not let them drag us into a place we don't want to be. So it's very much self-compassion. And I know that's something that's certainly very foreign and new to the industry, but self-compassion, mental hygiene is a huge thing. And I just want to highlight that that's something we want to address as well.
That's great. And Charles, on that point, I would like to ask you, going back to your psychological first aider, who would provide that service? Who would that be on board the vessel?
So ideally, it would be people who are generally interested in the subject of mental health. They understand what mental health is. It's not just I'm crazy, I'm not crazy, but that entire well-being, mental hygiene, taking care of yourself aspect, and being good in communication, being interested in welfare of the entire crew, and having that maybe empathetic talent in general. And again, generally interested in the subject, I think it would be the best to approach, which we would probably find out through having them in our courses and then them speaking out and saying, hey, I think I would like this very much. I think that's the first route to take.
Thank you so much. Now, it's the end of our webinar now, so thank you so much to everybody for tuning in to watch Caring for Crew Mental Health on Land and at Sea. And thank you to our panel, and a very special thank you to our sponsor, Inmarsat, for allowing us to talk about this very important issue here. Thank you, everyone. Have a lovely Christmas and New Year.
Thank you
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.